Chapter 27. The morning started out cool, but the reprieve from the heat did not last long. Moises led us northeast across the sandy desert floor. Javi still brought up the rear, and Elena had also now fallen behind me. She did not complain or ask to stop once, even though the sun now beat down relentlessly. And then the terrain turned uneven and rocky, but it did not slow Moises down one bit. We stopped before noon at a large outcropping. It consisted of several large boulders leaning against each other at odd angles. We stop here for the afternoon. Moises motioned us to the eastern side of the rocks. The rocks will give us some shade during the hottest part of the day. The shadows will get longer later in the afternoon, he explained. In the shade, Moises rationed out several large gulps of water and packets of brown sugar. Get out the tarps. He reached into his own backpack. Once I check for rattlesnakes, we'll spread them out and rest. He cautiously inspected several likely spots for snakes. Underneath a ledge jutting out from one of the rocks, an indentation between two of the boulders, and a hole that appeared to lead down into the ground right next to where our heads would be when we stretched out. Good, he announced. For the first time, he smiled. He was clearly in charge in his element. We have made decent progress. We're just where we need to be. He kicked a few random rocks out of the way. His smile widened. We were lucky to get such a nice hotel this time of year. People just cannot seem to get enough of this place. They are dying to come here. Moises pointed to the left. Your room is here, Javier. Sorry, Miguel and Elena, you will have to share a suite. That's okay, I replied. We're used to it. If Moises felt like we could have a little fun and make believe and pretend, I would play along. I pictured the postcards of the fancy Acapulco hotel Tio, my uncle, had worked at before he got lonely for Tia, my aunt, and the kids and came back home. All I could remember was the water, pool after pool of perfect clear blue water. I think I will go down to the pool later for a swim. Anyone want to go with me? I will go, Elena chimed in. But first, I am going to take a nap in this nice, big, soft bed. She patted the hard ground under the tarp. For me, a shower first. Then a steak. Perhaps 2 steaks. Javi smacked his lips. Well, enjoy your stay, Moises said. I will wake you when it is time to check out. He lay down flat on his backpack, on the far edge, closed his eyes, and appeared to be asleep within moments. He probably made the same joke every time he came through here with a group of politos. Things were going well. We all felt like we could afford a joke. Elena picked up the corner of the tarp closest to her and checked for rattlers or rattlesnakes one last time. She seemed satisfied and rolled over onto her side. Javi loosened his boots slightly but did not take them off. He sighed, lay back, put up one knee, and propped his bad ankle on top. I laid for some minutes just listening, but all I heard was our own breathing. I thought I heard the roar of a small engine far, far off, but the sound was gone before I was sure I had heard it. A hawk screeched after its prey. A whiff of a hot breeze blew silently across the sand, just enough to move a few grains here and there. The sand moaned softly, then went quiet again. I filled up the silence with imagining the sound of Abuelita's voice, gravelly and low, talking and humming to herself as she worked. What would she say if she saw this place? I bet she and Doña Maria would say to beware. I fell asleep holding Abuelita's medallion in my right hand. I woke to Moises's voice, low and urgent. I heard something. I'm going to investigate. Stay here. Don't move. I will be back quickly. Moises picked up his pack and headed down the northern edge of our outcropping. Elena hunkered down next to the closest boulder. Javi and I crawled as far as we could in the shelter of the stones. Then we crouched and peered out around the last rock. Moises was making his way north across a stretch of rolling dunes. Beyond the dunes were several small hills dotted with cactus. He went up and down with the landscape, finally disappearing beyond the crest of the first hill. It's probably nothing, Javi said knowingly. The desert can play tricks on you. It can make you believe things are there that are not. You know, like a mirage, the trick of light, he continued. Distances, too, they trick you. Things look closer than they really are. The illusions are everywhere. He crawled back to Elena. They both took drinks from Javi's water supply. My mouth was bone dry and fuzzy, so I checked my own water. Almost half of it was gone. Moises had done a good job of rationing. I drank thirstily. The rocks cast giant shadows now. I figured we had been out for 24 hours. Muy bien. We would make it. Moises had led us into this place, and he would lead us out. And then, crack! A rifle shot echoed across the desert from the north. Elena's head jerked up. Javi froze. No more shots followed the first, but fear spread through my arms and legs. I didn't feel the heat anymore. I was colder than I had ever been. It could be La Migra, the police. They could have fired a warning shot, perhaps, said Javi. But I do not think it's the law. It is the other ones, the militia, that Moises said would be here. He bent quickly to fold the tarps and stow the remaining water. Elena did not move, except for her head. It moved side to side, like radar scanning for signs of life. Shh, she said. Did you hear that? I heard something else. No one moved. From the north came the whine of an engine straining to mount a hill. I crawled once more to the edge of the outcropping to search for any sign of Moises. Coming down the closest hill and across the dunes was an open, four-wheel drive vehicle. An oversized United States flag flew from the antenna. Two men in military-type camouflage fatigues sat in front. The one in the passenger seat held his rifle, ready, the sun reflecting off his wraparound sunglasses. Moises's long body rolled across the back seat. They appeared to be heading straight toward us. I crouched lower. Don't move, I turned to warn Javi and Elena. Keep down, it's the militia. Not more than 100 meters from us, the driver turned the vehicle toward the west. Moises's head rolled to one side. His eyes closed. He held one hand to his right shoulder where blood oozed from a wound. Cradled in his other arm was his backpack. I started to get up, but Javi pulled me back. The last thing I saw was Moises slowly pushing his backpack out of the side of the Jeep. It landed with a soft thud on the desert floor. Javi, Elena, and I sat, unmoving, for many minutes. We waited until we could no longer hear the sound of the engine, until silence descended again on the desert. We stood together and looked to the west. There was no sign of the Jeep, not even a hint of dust. He threw his backpack out as close as he could to us. It's over there. I pointed to the black blob in front of us. We approached the pack slowly as if it were alive and dangerous. A dark circle of wetness spread out around it. Es mi agua, Elena said, pointing at the wet sand. It was my water. He had the rest of my water. She knelt down, picked up the pack, and turned it over. The bullet in Moises' shoulder had first ripped through both sides of the pack, leaving a hole big enough to put your finger through. Elena pulled her hands away from the pack. They were rosy pink, a mixture of Moises' blood and the water he was carrying, the same colors as the sunset on the western horizon. Chapter 28. It was just the three of us again. I had started out my journey alone. Elena had made us become 2, then Javi had made us become 3. Moises made 4. We should have finished as 4. I did not like the math. Moises was gone. Everything he knew about the desert, good and bad, was gone. His water and most of Elena's was all gone, swallowed by the desert sand. I had less than half of my water, and Javi about the same. Water could not be stretched. Even with the best of luck, there was enough for two of us, not three. We were going to make it, or we were not. We were going to live, or we were going to die. So right off, we broke two of the rules Moises had spelled out for us. First, we sat right on the ground. Second, we talked. More than we had to. Behind the boulders, we made a plan. We will walk again tonight, as far as we can, Javi said. Moises said to head to the east of that mountain. He pointed at the jagged peak that loomed in the distance to the north. 1 kilometer away, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, more. We didn't know. There, somewhere is a town and a highway. West for you two, east for me, said Javi. Javi held out his thumb as if he were hitching a ride. In Moises's pack, we'd found some $20 bills. It seemed like enough to buy us bus tickets or a ride, but who knew? I didn't have much experience with dollars. Papa and Mama could never get enough dollars together to send for us, even when they worked non-stop day and night. Maybe one of those $20 bills was like nothing in California. Maybe people carried around dozens of them, big piles of them, just to buy a bit of goat meat or some milk, or put a little gas in the car. Javi looked to the east. How far do you think we can see? How far before there's a river or a stream or any water at all? I shrugged. There was nothing to block our view. The sky had turned from dark blue to a blue so deep it was nearly black. There was no hint of the horizon, no clue as to where the desert or the earth ended. New York is over there somewhere. If I just walk east, I will get there. I will see my brother. He is waiting for me, you know. He is expecting me soon. All I have to do is get there. Javi stood up and took a few steps eastward. He seemed ready to take off into the darkness at that moment, in the wrong direction. Javi! I rose to stop him. You take the lead, Javi said, turning back to me. Walk at Moises's pace. I will keep up. Don't worry about me. You have to make it tonight. You don't have a choice. What if we don't make it? Elena asked quietly. What if we get lost or we run out of water? We're going to make it, Elena. I said it as much for my benefit as for hers. I let the possibility of failure creep up from deep in my mind, then pushed the thought back down. Failing now meant dying. It is too late to give up now, isn't it? But what if one of us can't make it? Elena persisted. She wanted everything spelled out. Even in the heat, goosebumps popped out of my arms. Goosebumps. Not for a chupacabra or La Llorona or stolen body parts. They were a result of cold, deep fear at having to make a choice that no one should have to make. Escalofríos, no de fantasmas, sino de vida y muerte. It's all of us or none of us, Elena declared. We won't leave anyone behind. We won't. I can't. It won't come to that. It does not have to come to that. If worse comes to worse, give yourselves up to La Migra. Javi grabbed the edge of a boulder to steady himself. His breath came in ragged puffs. Look, he pointed out matter-of-factly, it's better to be alive to try again. You're young. Your whole life is in front of you. If you cross enough times, you will make it sooner or later. So we set out. Before the moon rose, the night was as black could be. I tried to walk quickly, but I had to watch every step to avoid a rock or a rut or a cactus in our way. Then, when the moon did rise, we came to terrain crisscrossed with ravines. We slid down the soft earth and sand on one side, picked our way across, and climbed clumsily up the other side. Javi and Elena grunted behind me as we crossed through our third ravine. The bottom of it was covered with stunted mesquite and chaparral. We had to push our way through thorny branches that punctured our arms, even through our long sleeves. Deep scratches soon covered my palms and the back of my hands. Was this the route that Moises intended to take? Maybe he knew a different path around this part of hell. But we didn't stop. After midnight, clouds began to cover the moon. I paused briefly to check our progress. The mountain was still in the right position, but it did not look much closer than it had before. I was disheartened, but I kept it to myself. More clouds built up across the sky and to the east. A mighty bolt of lightning cut down to the ground. Thunder followed. I sniffed the air. The smell of newly wet earth reached us. It was raining to the east. Huge sheets of lightning showed our way briefly, followed by deafening thunder and then complete darkness. We had to stop to let our eyes adjust to the change. Each time the lightning seemed more blinding. Each time the darkness seemed darker. The thunder reverberated in my skull and my ribs and my shins. Then suddenly it started to rain. It was a hard, pounding downpour that soaked us within seconds before we even had a chance to pull out our jackets. We stood and let the rain stream over us for several minutes. The storm passed as quickly as it came. It lasted only long enough to cool the temperature by maybe 30 degrees. It didn't last long enough for water to collect. Water we needed badly. Now what? Elena asked me, her teeth chattering wildly. Change. We take off the wet shirts and put on our jackets. We'll dry the shirts tomorrow. I was making this up as I went along. It seemed like a good thing to do, or the only thing we could do. So we changed, and we walked, and we walked, and we walked. The ground leveled to a sort of valley. I thought I found a faint trail. It was narrow, but it headed in the right direction. I lengthened my stride, hoping to make up for time we had lost earlier in the night. I moved to avoid a branch on my left, brushing up against a cactus on the right. Ow! I complained. I rubbed my hand, and the pain intensified. Hundreds of tiny spurs covered my fingers. I bent to see if I could pick them out, but the light was too dim. There were too many anyway. All of those are the cellas I heard of. Javi took out his comb and handed it to me. They penetrate your skin and stick in. Rake them off. It's the only way. A challa had also attacked Elena. She sniffed in pain but said nothing. She took turns with Javi's comb many times that night. Every stop cost us precious time and energy. Was this the place trying so hard to protect? Why bother with fences or La Migra or militias? The heat, the cold, the snakes, the evil chala spurs, they all conspired to keep us out or slow us down or outright kill us. I tried and tried, but I couldn't seem to find a route straight toward our landmark. Whenever I headed up north, a ravine or cactus or part of a barbed wire fence made us veer either east or west. Each time it slowed us down. Twice we ducked down flat and hid when headlights flickered on a dirt road. We believed it was La Migra out on patrol. But I worried most about something else. We were going slowly, yet Javi continued to fall behind. He caught up when we stopped, but each time it took him longer to reach us. The rough terrain had to be hurting his ankle. At dawn, I turned to watch Javi struggle toward us again. He limped slightly, but it was more than that. He looked shrunken and wizened, as if the desert were sucking out his insides. Elena came up right next to me. She squinted her eyes toward the mountain. It now appeared to be several kilometers away. It looks closer. How much farther do you think? She asked. I remembered what Javi had said about illusions in the desert. I had no idea how far we had to go, but I looked at her, then at me. Our condition was the opposite of illusion. Deep scratches covered our hands, arms, faces. Barbed wire had torn my short shirt in front and one knee of my pants. One thorn was deeply embedded in my forearm. It would be infected soon if I didn't get it out. Elena's face was badly sunburned. She sat and pulled off her left boot. A blister, broken and leaking fluid, covered her hand. But the worst part of it all was the thirst. I'd allowed us only small sips of water during the night. But what was it that Moises said? Something about not getting too thirsty? Something about not saving the water? I could not make sense of that advice. I figured we had enough left for a small amount of each. Then it would be gone anyway. It was early morning, and already the sun had no mercy. I did not want to think about how hot it was going to get. I pulled out the water and swallowed several small drinks. Elena watched me closely and then took exactly the same amount for herself, and Javi wet his lips. Drink, Elena and I said together. He put the bottle up to his lips and rolled his head back. Listen, you two, Javi said, stowing his water bottle in his pack. I have something to tell you. His usual face had slowed to a crawl. His usual fast talk had slowed to a crawl. His words slurred together. Everything about him seemed to have slowed down. Miguel is in charge now. He looked at Elena to make his point. Do what he says. Then he seemed to summon something from deep within. He pushed himself up, groaning with each movement. You'll make it. I promise. Remember, and I'll be right behind you every step of the way.